Welcome to the AgEmerge podcast, brought to you by Ag Solutions Network. Your farming challenges are unique, so your practices should be too. We're here to share emerging ideas, build connections, and provoke conversation.
Get ready to improve your soil, your crops, your livestock, and your family's livelihood. I'm your producer, Kim Chase.
And I'm your host, Monty Bottens. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for joining us. Today we welcome Meghan Filbert and Allysse Sorensen to the podcast. Meghan and Allysse are both part of the Nofence team, and they're working with growers to bring livestock back to the land. They both have extensive experience in addressing barriers to grazing, both perennial and annual forages. And what we've learned about building soil health has led to even more knowledge regarding grazing livestock, which can be a critical component in the system. And that system includes not only soil benefits, but income and community opportunities as well. There's so much to cover, so let's jump right in. Well, I have to tell you that I'm the one who's excited today to welcome Meghan and Allysse to the podcast. As you might have noticed, we're missing Monty today. He's been busy harvesting, and so we've taken over the mic in his absence. It's great to be in the studio having this discussion with you both today. So, Allysse and Meghan, we really want to start this conversation today with talking about what has really driven you down this path of not only soil health, but I know that just regenerating the land, bringing livestock back to the land is such a passion for you both. And so I hope that you'll each take a turn here and tell us a little bit of your story and what has driven you down this path.
Great. Thanks, Kim. Very happy to be here. I'll jump in. So I'm kind of just obsessed with grazing and getting animals, back out onto the landscape. I live in central Iowa, and in Iowa, just like the Corn Belt, we've witnessed this separation of livestock and cropping systems. And we know that for soil health and improved water quality, we need to merge those two back together. So for the last decade, I've been working with livestock farmers. I started my career in upstate New York, in a region where it's New York City's watershed. So there's a ton of clean water that flows down to the city that's used for drinking water. But it originates in an area where there's tons of livestock farms, specifically like small to mid-sized dairies. And so I learned a lot about how to keep clean water clean and how to manage dairies and manure properly for water quality. And while I was doing that work, I was admiring the work of Practical Farmers of Iowa, a nonprofit in central Iowa, from afar. I'm originally from Iowa, and I was thinking, it would be really nice to apply what I'm learning here to my home state, where there are super critical water quality issues taking place. And this is back in 2015, when there's kind of this infamous lawsuit happening around water quality in Iowa. So I moved back here, started working with Practical Farmers of Iowa, and really my whole charge was like, let's get more grazing on the landscape. That eventually turned into producing a film called Livestock on the Land. And we've seen tons of positive improvement about people getting more livestock integrated into perennial pastures, but specifically in grazing cover crops. And for the farmers that were already doing it, helping farmers to take it to the next level and like rotate more and just manage their grazing in a better way. And so as I was on this journey, specifically talking with row crop farmers about like what it would take to integrate livestock into your system, that it would be great for fertility and soil health, et cetera, et cetera. What would it take? And farmers, the number one the number one answer that I heard, probably literally over 1,000 times, was, I don't have fence. Like, there's no way. I took fence out years ago to make way for my crops and to make way for my equipment. And if I do have fence, it's in disrepair. I'm just not, there's no way I'm going to mess with it. And then you think about inflation and what we're dealing with now and the actual cost of fencing infrastructure. And it's just like almost impossible. It already was. And so knowing that was like a major hurdle for so many farmers that have these lush beds of cover crops and so much forage out there that they could eat, but just not seeing the livestock presence. I heard about virtual fencing 6 years ago, and my mind was completely blown. And I was like, this is the answer. This is what we need. And so I've been kind of like spreading the gospel of virtual fencing technology for 5-6 years to groups of farmers, and literally their jaws drop. Just rooms full of cattlemen, like in disbelief, which I feel that, and I finally was given the opportunity to work for Nofence and work in this industry and spearhead the adoption of virtual fence. So I jumped at the opportunity, and I transitioned away from Practical Farmers of Iowa and started working for Nofence this last summer in 2022. So I'll leave it at that.
That's an awesome story and we'll unpack all of that stuff. Allysse, you want to tell us a little bit about what brought you to this space?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I was a classic city slicker. In fact, I probably could have made a remake of that movie. No agricultural experience at all. And what brought me to farming was actually going to Sweden. And I was trying to find a way to kind of sustain myself over there. And I was a volunteer with WOOF, which is Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. I ended up staying on a lot of goat farms, and I thought goats were just like the goofiest, fun, most just smiley animal on the planet. And when I came back from that experience, I decided I never want to write another resume again. I just want to build my business with goats, and I'm going to find a way to do this. And so I looked into a lot of different goat enterprises. I mean, the common ones would be meat, cheese, fiber to some extent. And there wasn't really anything that you could support yourself on some income without having like an off-farm income. And so we really wanted something that would support both my husband and I. So we were at an organic farming conference, and there was a poster board about how to build a small winter shelter for your goats. And the presenter of that poster board told us, you need to get into targeted grazing. That's the enterprise where there's the most potential. And we said, well, the thing is, we don't have any goats, and we don't have any land. We don't own a truck or a trailer. We own nothing to do that. And she said, oh, that doesn't matter. And so she convinced us that if we just started with 2 goats, small truck, a small trailer, that we could get started and we would have a client base. And she was absolutely right. Our first 2 goats, we put them directly onto a job site. They never even came to the property that we had secured for our farm. And it was just a surprising venture from there. We didn't have to do a lot of advertising. It was really word of mouth. We had a solid website, but after the first couple of years, it was really apparent that the demand was so strong that we were never going to be able to keep up with it. And so what we did was we actually had to limit our service area for one. But we were finding that people were waiting 2 to 4 years for our services. I just got to a customer last year that had been waiting for 4 years. And that kind of dedication to wanting to manage land using goats was just astounding to me. I mean, if you think about other service industries, it would be like waiting 4 years for a plumber. I mean, who does that?
Right.
So it's just it's this really amazing thing where you get to make such an impact on the land in so many different settings. We work both residentially and in public lands. So there'll be like 2 acres in a homeowner's backyard, kind of near the city, or it'll be a public project, 5 to 40 acres on either a small city park, or even the DNR has contracted with us. So it could just be a variety of landscapes, but we're predominantly focusing on buckthorn and honeysuckle, exotic honeysuckle, and those kind of invasive plants. So it's just been like one big crazy ride. And then throughout this time that we were building this enterprise, I just love technology, and I'll pretty much implement any piece of technology on my farm as I can. One of the things that we put into the farm was microchipping, because it's such an easy way to record data and just make sure that the simplest thing of like, who is on the trailer, who got off the trailer, who did we leave anybody at the site? And so I've really loved putting any piece of technology into this. And so when I heard about Nofence, it was something, it was just a no-brainer, game changer for us, because we historically have spent hours, 7 days a week, the whole season, 200 days long, putting up and tearing down fences. So it's not a lot of goat interaction, it's a lot of fencing interaction. And I'm proud to say that I can roll a portable net fence in less than 4 minutes, but I'd prefer not to.
That's an impressive skill. I feel like, you know, how they have like lumberjack contests, you know, they need to have fencing
Totally
contests.
I would go to that.
Yeah,
I would definitely sign up to be a spectator.
Well, and there's all this controversy over how you do it. You can roll it or you can fold it. There's double spike versus single spike. It's a big thing.
So I mean, we may have just started a new, you know, activity to go to. So just put that in the back of your mind. But
Farm Olympics.
That's right. That's right. But it's so exciting. And when I hear both of you tell your story, the thing that I recognize so much is that you took information and experiences with you along each of your steps that really has been so valuable to bring you to the spot that you're at today, you know, and the different things that you have learned and that you've seen, that you knew how important being able to travel down this path of solving this problem when we know that we need grazing on the land. And so that's exciting to see. And I'm sure that is exciting for you guys to live every day.
Oh yeah, that fuels me. It's why I wake up in the morning. It just totally fuels me up. And like getting to directly address like farmers' issues and helping provide them a solution is just so incredibly exciting.
That's fantastic. Well, and as we kind of dig into it, so we know that we've all talked with people who've had this conversation about, I don't have the fence, I don't, you know, but let's step back first and talk about why integrating livestock on the land is so critical, and what are the benefits. And it's not just, you know, a soil health benefit. There are other benefits to getting these livestock back and grazing the land. Do you guys want to kind of tag team on that and talk a little bit about some of those areas?
Absolutely. There's lots of things going through my head. Where do I start? So I guess I want to talk a little bit specifically about integrating livestock into like our really basic corn and bean systems in the upper Midwest, because that's like what I've dealt with a bunch over the last several years. So we know that cover crops are super, super important to hold the soil in place, number one, right? And then all kinds of other benefits, roots in the ground year round, water quality, soil health. But cover crops are a financial barrier. They do cost, $15 to $35 to $50 per acre. When corn prices are down, it's hard to figure out how to pay for those. But we also know that when you can add value to cover crops by putting them through a ruminant, most likely cattle or sheep, that offsets the cost. It adds a ton of value, and essentially, cattle and sheep can graze cover crops almost sometimes throughout the whole winter season, and therefore offset the cost of their winter feed or their hay. And I know farmers that have saved $40,000 a winter through grazing cover crops. That's after taking out the costs of the seed and the planting of the cover crop. So I feel as though if we know we need more cover crops on the landscape within our cropping systems all across the nation, all across the world. And the way to make them pay is to graze them. And so to be able to more easily get livestock out there, farmers are going to more easily say, okay, I'm willing to plant cover crops. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's one angle. Allysse, do you want to take a stab at it?
I think my biggest angle, from my background, is putting livestock in places where it seemed unachievable. Just don't even think about it before with any sort of fencing. And then you take no fence and all of a sudden this is possible. Mm-hmm. I mean, there were certainly sites with my career with the Munch Bunch where we had to turn things down because it wasn't physically possible for us as humans. It wasn't about the goats. They're pretty agile little buggers and they didn't have a problem with that. But to be able to just say, yes, I can do that. It's such a powerful thing. And when I see different farms around me and I look at the pastures that some of the animals are in, and I think, wow, with no fence, you could just move those animals just over there. And with just the push of a button, it's such an amazing revolutionary technology. Your brain starts to think in a totally new way when you use this system. It's like all these things where if this, then this, I can do this now. Mm-hmm. And it just unfolds. The more and more you use it, you realize what is possible. It's incredibly empowering. And I just want all farmers to feel that. So that's really why I'm jazzed about getting started with no fence as well.
For sure. We're taking a short break to share that the AgEmerge podcast is brought to you by the team at Ag Solutions Network. Rooted in innovation, ASN is committed to leaving the land better than we found it, not simply maintaining it. We're here to help you navigate the balancing act of productivity and building a legacy. From practices to products, ASN is more than a new jug. It's a new way of thinking. So don't be afraid to be different. Be afraid to be the same. Contact Ag Solutions Network today at asn.farm. And now, back to our show.
Can I mention one more thing?
Yes, please.
So I also, through my work with farmers, I've really come to understand kind of the social implications of why livestock are so important, especially to our rural communities. When we started getting rid of livestock, let's say in the 80s with the farm crisis, and just kind of transitioning only to crops, then you don't have to be on the farm as much, you can then go into town and get a job because there's not something that necessarily needs tending to every day. Mm-hmm. And there's less chores for kids. And so families, then they moved to urban centers, and we've kind of, especially in the Midwest, we've seen this loss of small towns. And I think it's really because we've lost livestock, especially livestock that are raised more in this mimicking nature, outdoor based way, not necessarily under roofs and confinement. Because again, livestock raised in that way, you don't need much labor for it. But livestock require labor, and they require just a presence, a presence there. And so I think the more that we can make it easier for farmers, and easier and exciting for farmers to reintegrate livestock on our landscape, we know all the environmental benefits, but these, like, it will help the social fabric, you know, of our communities. And that's really, like, ultimately what drives me. And
Yes. And I think that's so important. I live in a small town, 3,700 people. And right now we're having a bit of a revitalization because someone has seen how important it is to make some of that happen. And so, and it's a whole lot of someone's, not just one, but
Sure.
it is critical, and it's critical for our school systems and everything to take advantage of that. But I'd love for you to talk for a minute about, you know, we've talked about that benefit, but what do your farmers and growers say once you've been there, say that first time, or they've experienced the livestock? And because I know what the soil looks like after livestock have grazed on it and what that soil system, I'm just shocked at how quickly it is regenerating itself. And so could you talk a little bit about what you've heard, or what people, their aha moments? Have you experienced that with some of your farmers?
Definitely. Um, I think that when you have livestock out grazing in your pastures, not only is it, like, bucolic and aesthetically, like, nice to see, you know, cars slow down and want to take a picture or two. So I just think that there's maybe this sense of, like, tending to more life on the farm. Um, and and once once you get past the hurdles of, like, getting the livestock on the farm or working with your neighbor to bring their cows over or whatever that looks like, you kind of quickly realize, like, okay, this is manageable, and look at what they've just gleaned for me. Or, hopefully you'll start to see the color of your soil start to change. I know soil health changes take a long time, it's more of a long-term effect. Mm-hmm. But some things you start to see right away is, if you are integrating more forages for animals to graze, then you have more roots in the ground year round, and therefore when we get a major rain event, you're not having gullies. Essentially, you're, like, managing the water better, and that's something that you see, like, pretty much right away. Is, like, field fitness. Your field just it can take extreme weather events better. Mm-hmm. And that's all part of this, like, perennial plus grazing solution.
Exactly.
Yep.
Yeah, that's exciting. And you're kind of, you're really bringing in a lot of parties to play, and there's a lot of different avenues that they can go. And Allysse, I know you talked about how you've done work with different groups, not just on farm ground, but on different ground. Can you tell us a little bit about some of those other areas, and what are some of the differences, the before and after of when you've been able to graze those areas, and what did they look like?
Yeah. So the system is slower. I mean, you're not going to see lots of changes within the first year, but the customers who've been with us for 3 or 4 years, we see the monitor the changes, and it's just amazing to watch it open up. I mean, one of the first things that happens is you remove one invasive species, but you're probably going to get a new one that then has to be dealt with, because once you have buckthorn, then garlic mustard will follow. But you can keep working at it until the point where you say, okay, there's a lot of native forbs here, and there's no buckthorn left, no garlic mustard left. I think we're done here, and this is all open. The kids can run around. And the homeowner is excited because they've done something that, they've had a good stewardship relationship with their property. So I think that we've seen so much, but also it's inspiring small homesteaders to also manage their properties. They want like a few livestock on the land, but they're really unsure about fencing, because the barrier to understanding what kind of fencing that you need and how to make sure it's properly working with the livestock, it can be quite intimidating. So I think Nofence can really open it up for those small homesteaders, and then they can work on some of the invasive plants that they know about. But if you're a small homestead and you're focusing on vegetable production, you're not going to have a lot of time to manage some of the invasive plants on your property with mechanical means. It's very daunting. So, but yeah, we see a lot of changes, just targeted grazing, but also just having livestock on the property.
Mm-hmm. Well, before we started the conversation here earlier, we were talking about some of those barriers to grazing, and we've talked about some of them, but are there more barriers that we can help growers overcome as we move down this path to not just targeted grazing, but just like even like a mob grazing situation? I guess that is targeted, but what kind of barriers have you seen that you've been able to overcome?
Well, so I mean, the obvious first barrier is fence, right? Which is what we've been talking about. But I would say like the second barrier to adopting more rotations and like what we call regenerative grazing, adaptive, holistic grazing, many different names for it, is labor, right? Like so many farmers know that that's what they should be doing and that's what they want to do. They would love to move their animals twice a day if they could, but they can't, because maybe they have an off-farm job, or just they actually just physically can't make it there to move them. So now with virtual fence technology, you could move your animals every 10 minutes if you wanted to. Let them take a bite and keep them going. So that, I just think the labor piece is massive.
Yeah. And I mean, I'm doing a whole research project on studying the labor between portable net fencing and no fence. And my final results aren't really out yet, so I can't really share them. But I can tell you just anecdotally that I've been able to have 3 days or more off, like where I wasn't having to visit a job site. And I talked about how I was a 7-day schedule before. And additionally, it takes about 2 hours maybe to set up a particular site with, I won't name how many acres. I mean, it's probably, an acre or two. But now with no fence, it's about 15 minutes. The feeling of opening the trailer doors and letting the animals out and saying, okay, they're understanding their boundaries, I'm gonna go. It's an amazing feeling. I mean, yeah
it really is.
I will say one other thing, especially with farmers who like maybe grew up with livestock, but they just knew they could never get away and take vacations because they had livestock, or they had to find a farm sitter. And that's why they love cropping, because they can go away twice a year, whatever it is. So again, it's the labor barrier, but it's like the having to be always present and available. I'm not saying that no fence should replace like setting your eyes on your animals, but we just know that it's not realistic all of the time. And so because all of the collars have their GPSed, you can open your app at any time and look at where every single one of your animals is. And then you're always getting notifications if they're getting pulses or if there's an escape. Yeah. So every night when your head hits the pillow before you go to bed, you can check your app and say, my animals are in, and sleep better, and even if your animals get out, you're notified of it. And if they all escape, they're GPSed, so you can go get them. Right. So like just that quality of life, and that comes with peace of mind. How do we quantify it? I don't know, but it's huge.
Exactly.
I mean, I should jump in with stories about these goats running around various cities. There was one time when our goats got spooked by the fireworks that were going off near the city bank, the water. And basically the goats were running around with the people watching the fireworks at night. And that was just great fun for the firework goers, but not so fun for the police to round them up. And so there's been all sorts of these crazy things that have happened to us where if you get a phone call, your heart is going, where are my goats? Who's loose? And how fast am I going to have to get there? And with Nofence, one of these things that happened was just like, okay, wait a second. If the goats get loose, it's not great, but I know exactly where they are. And if I have the opportunity, I can rezone them in an area. So I can just take them and keep them in an area where I know that they're safe. Once they're rezoned, they're unlikely to run away again. So whatever caused that situation. So it's just this massive feeling of being comfortable with what's going on with the herd. You also know how many are there. Are they healthy? Are they alive? I mean, it sounds silly, but like you would know, you would be notified. And so you don't have to count the goats because they already have collars. So one of my favorite things that I did this summer was I was in Chicago after visiting you, Kim. And I'm in downtown Chicago. And I was like, oh, I should really move the goats. So I opened up the app and I just added an area and just moved them. It was like, I cannot believe that I am moving my fencing from downtown Chicago, and all these city people walking around me, they have no idea that I've just done something amazing agriculturally.
Yeah.
You needed to do a TikTok right then and there of someone
Exactly.
videoing you in downtown Chicago moving your goats.
That was hard
put that
work.
on your social media idea for later.
Our colleagues in Norway have mentioned things like, now they can easily go to the farmers they work with can easily go to a wedding and say yes to, like, my whole family can go to the wedding this weekend or to the soccer games, just like farmers can now join in on all of the activities without as much being preoccupied about what if this happens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that kind of leads us into, really the whole tech side of how this works. So I'll let you guys talk a little bit about that. But when I think about, Allysse, when you said you could just rezone, I mean, what kind of comfort level does that give you? I mean, it's a little bit of a superpower, isn't it? Like that you put your little invisibility cloak around your goats and, away you go to, to get to them. But talk a little bit about what the tech, that tech side and both the user experience and the animals experience. Tell us a little bit about that.
Go for it, Allysse.
From the tech side, I am an early adopter techie, so you probably shouldn't take anything. Say that's a techie, she knows what she's doing. But honestly, I thought that I was going to have to be trained. I thought I was going to have to sit down and take like a bunch of webinars on how to do it, and I had mentally prepared for kind of a intense process of understanding the system. And when the collars came, I had already kind of played with the app, but it was like I could almost put the collar on the animals and just start going, because it is so intuitive. The app is so intuitive, and it really is kind of plug and play. I actually used to work at IKEA, and they make these, these manuals they have all the little figures that are super hard to understand, right? But you actually know when the product is so easy to put together, they actually don't even include assembly instructions. And if it were Nofence, that would be this. Like, they almost don't need that IKEA manual. Yeah. It's very important to read the manual and to understand how the animals will interact with the system, and obviously just knowing what the system does. But as far as navigation of the system, It's so incredibly easy. I feel confident that even the farmers with the flip phones could figure it out.
Yeah. And I will say that I am not a techie. Like I studied animal science for a reason, because I'm just like such a hands-on person and want to be in nature all of the time. Like, don't want my cell phone with me. And like, I have found this app so incredibly easy to use and enjoyable. Like, I have fun doing it. I look forward to opening the app and creating a new paddock and moving the animals. I also think it's fun to mention that, so a little bit about the training process from the animal side is that animals are trained to the technology in like 3 to 5 days. And we say wait 1 to 2 weeks before you're fully letting them have a virtual barrier. So to train them initially, you like train them in a pasture that they're used to, like home pasture close to the house where you can have your eyes on them. And you create a regular paddock with physical fencing. And so one of those sides of the physical fence you bring in with the virtual. So they're essentially contained by 1 virtual side and 3 physical. Mm-hmm. And that's how you start. And then it could be 2 virtual, 2 physical. And really, we just trained our goats here. It literally took about 5 days. It takes longer for the farmer to learn all, again, the app is easy, but it still takes farmers longer to like understand the system than it does the livestock themselves. Mm-hmm. And I've been asked the question, like, can every animal learn it? And there are 50,000 collars on animals in Europe, in Norway, in the UK, and in Spain right now. And every single animal has been able to learn but one, and they found out that was a deaf cow. So deaf animals cannot use the system.
Interesting.
And they didn't know that animal was deaf before.
How would you know that until you
realize that they're not responding and something is up. Yeah.
Fascinating.
So
that is amazing. Mm-hmm. And the sheer quantity of animals that you've been working with, I just think it's just remarkable. And I also think it just kind of goes to show that, livestock one of the things that I've noticed is that they kind of love it when they're like, oh, we're getting new pasture, so they're excited about the moves and the area. It's almost like they know that, hey, I'm not going to have to be here long. I don't know if they know that or not. It just seems like they are ready to do those moves and things that you want them to do. Is that kind of what you guys see?
What they know is that sometimes they reach for that juicy blade of grass and they get an audio cue, right? Mm-hmm. Which is what they're trained to. And then that means no. But sometimes when the farmer has moved the paddock, they reach for that blade of grass and nothing happens, no repercussions, no negative repercussions. And so it's safe.
Yes.
So, and I guess I should just say for the listeners, we haven't really clarified this. So essentially, animals each wear a collar. Every adult animal in the herd is recommended to wear a collar. That collar looks like a cowbell. And so on either side of that like hard plastic unit that is cowbell shaped is a solar panel that's continually charging a battery that's inserted inside the collar. And it hangs by a metal chain around the animal's neck. And so when you set the virtual boundary from your smartphone, and when an animal approaches that boundary, it starts to get audible cues. It sounds like beep, 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 beep. And then upon that highest pitch beep is what triggers the collar to send an electrical shock through the chain. Mm-hmm. And that's how they learn.
Yes. Yes.
And so when animals are first trained, it's like a bunch of audible cue, sounds followed by pulses, right? They're learning the system, they're learning cause and effect. But then you quickly start seeing, oh, there's audible beeps, but no pulse. They're turning around at the sound of that beep, and okay, they're becoming more trained. And so it's like pretty amazing to see data up, graphs and figures showing like so many shocks at the beginning and it just drops off dramatically.
Yes.
And I think Nofence says it's the average is 20 audible cues to 1 pulse on average for all of Nofence animals.
So they're quick to respond and not really getting that shock or, you know, feel.
Yep.
Yeah. So that's exciting. And
Yeah.
on a little side note, did someone tell me that the audible is actually a nursery rhyme tune in Norway? Did I hear that?
Only the noise to locate the collar. It's a cute little melody. It's adorable. Sometimes I play it just to put me to sleep at night.
So to clarify, if a collar were to fall off, that doesn't happen often, but if it were to fall off and be laying in some tall grass and you couldn't find it, you can press a button on the app that says locate collar. And so it gives a different noise, and it's a Norwegian children's nursery rhyme.
Awesome.
Beloved children's
beloved. Yes, we've learned that is a beloved nursery rhyme in Norway. I asked if it was learned Norwegian national anthem, but it should be. So yeah,
that's fantastic, because I mean it's why I have a tile on my keys and in my billfold,
exactly.
And because they wind up in the strangest places. And, but you hope that doesn't happen often, and I know that you guys know that that's a kind of a rare occasion, but you've addressed it. So
yeah,
and that's exciting. And so from the user experience to the cow, the calf, or the goat or the sheep, they really, it's really a short learning curve, and but opens up huge potential then for farmers to start adopting this. And I think that's what's exciting, is that before this situation, I get it, the unrolling of fence, and having to just even, as you follow through regenerative ag stuff, if you're on Facebook, you're in a group, and everyone's like, what fencing do I need? And I mean, there's just this whole litany of things, like, what's the list of equipment I've got to have? And so this just like addresses so many things, that it eliminates the need for that's super exciting.
Yeah. Think about not having to like pound posts in when it's like really dry or the ground's frozen. I know farmers that get really creative with like bringing their drill out and drilling holes and then pounding the post. No more of that.
Yeah, I mean,
nice.
I'm sort of thankful that Nofence wasn't around when I was in high school, because in the summer, those were my gigs.
Yeah.
So, like setting fence posts and, safety third, using the loader bucket to push the steel posts into the ground, So
right.
Thank you for saving lives. And
yes,
but, there's a lot of stuff like that that I think are just sort of the unintended benefits of it. So I love all those directions that you talked about. And you did talk about, so we're starting to see you guys at events, and we're seeing a little bit of a US presence. Can you talk a little bit about what Nofence has plans for the US?
Yeah, I sure can. So we aim to start commercial sales in the United States in mid-2023, so next summer. We currently are initiating about 75 pilot projects across the nation, and that's on cattle, sheep, and goat farms. And so those are going to run. Some folks are going to get started now because they're going to use them for their winter grazing scenarios. Some folks are going to wait to get started in the spring, but essentially those pilot projects will run a full grazing season before, and then at that same time, commercial sales will open up. So we're getting really close. That's less than a year away, and it's actually real now. You know, we've been waiting a really long time for this.
Yes.
I know so many farmers have been waiting a really long time for this. In December, it's a virtual conference. It's a part of the Perennial Farm Gathering. It's put on by the Savannah Institute, which is out of Wisconsin. So we'll be exhibiting and speaking there. And then it really, like, conference season kicks off. So then we're going to kind of be all over the place, mostly still in the Midwest, because that's where we're located. And because we're not open for commercial sales yet, we don't have to go crazy, because, you know, it's hard to tell people, like, please continue to wait, you know?
Yes.
So we're going to do a selection of Midwestern conferences over the winter, and then farm shows in the summer. But then, like, in 2023, 2024, we'll also have more staff around the US. We're going to be pretty much all the places. Yeah.
That's so exciting. And I think it'll be neat for people to actually see you and talk to you guys at conferences and actually look at the collars.
Exactly.
I'm fortunate to be able to mess with them and may or may not have had one hanging around my neck. But once you see it, you really get a vision of what this can look like. And it's so exciting. And so that's just neat. And I'm glad you guys will be able to do that. And I think we've come through a long season of knowing that we have to wait for some of these things, especially when they're like tech-based, right? Yeah. So we totally get that. So I can appreciate that very much. And, you know, I didn't want to forget to talk about it as you were talking about that you were Midwest focused, but talk just for a minute about, you know, we've talked about some of your different clients, but talk about in the Western states, what you guys are doing and where you see those collars really fitting in.
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few inquiries and requests from folks out west that are using livestock for wildfire suppression, right? Like, that's absolutely critical right now. And we know that especially, like, custom grazing goat operations are popping up to specifically address that need. And, you know, they're dealing with everything like Allysse mentioned with the fencing woes, and the other pieces. You know, we've talked to folks in New Mexico who had cattle out on, like, Forest Service land, and all of the fence burned up in the fire in all these massive wildfires. So, like, just thinking about its implications and use to help us, you know, suppress wildfires or be proactive about wildfire management is really, really exciting and important.
It really is. And I think as we look at all these different things that we've talked about, we've talked about how, you know, the soil health benefits of being able to graze, and, you know, the community benefits, and then all of these extraneous benefits, like being able to graze in areas for fire suppression and things like that. When you look at all that across the board, it checks off a lot of things on the list, doesn't it? And making it easier for adoption is really the key. And it kind of goes back to what we talk a lot about on AgEmerge, is like understanding the technology that will be necessary to adopt these things. And that's kind of what we know is important as we move along, and being able to use technology to our benefit. So it's so exciting. Well, you know, we always have to, go ahead, Megan.
Kim, I have one question for Allysse. I'm just curious her experience with this. So, like, on our very first day where we took up after the goats were trained and we took up all of the fence and they just had the collars in the field, sure enough, here comes a truck pulling in the driveway. Your goats are out. So, Allysse, tell me, like, how often does that happen to you? How do you address that? Like, the goats are out, they're not within fence.
I have an entire written protocol on what we do.
Okay. Like hanging in the pasture or something, or?
Well, no, but what we do is, if it's a singular goat, we'll obviously try to work with that particular goat. But I would say in the case where they're all loose, we're basically trying to form a human net around them and trying to push them to where we want them to be. And
really quick, let me interject. I meant like our goats weren't out. They were just virtually fenced in, right? And so the farmer thought they were out because he didn't see a fence.
That moment where you're like, wait a second, this is totally normal to me that my goats are not fenced right now, but other people don't have any understanding that this is a technology at all.
Yeah.
Like our UPS driver would show up and be like, there's goats out there. Should they be out there? Yeah, actually they should. And then I have to go into this total monologue about virtual fencing. But then after people hear about it, they're so excited. So what we've done in public sites is we've actually put up these signs that say there are goats in front of you and they're not contained by a physical fence. And I actually put in a little blurb about not feeding the goats, and how I did it was I said, like, you don't know if these goats might have a nut allergy.
You never know these days.
You never know if they have a nut allergy. Just to get them thinking about like, oh, maybe I don't know enough about these animals to be able to comfortably feed them. And that sign works great for us so far.
Good.
That's been
cool.
So it's
it's just like another piece that like these livestock owners have to consider, you know, of how the public will see it.
Right. Which, you know, they've already had the public talking about them anyway, if they're doing regenerative ag stuff, because they've got crazy cover crops and things going on anyway. So why not one more crazy thing?
Exactly.
You know? So, but it's an exciting thing. And so that's what I love. Is there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you guys want to discuss? Or
I'm willing to, you know, share our contact information. Like we can both be reached at our first name at nofence.no. So mine's Meghan, Meghan at nofence.no, and anyone can reach out who's interested. And Allysse, you could share yours.
Yeah, so it's ALLYSSE at nofence.no.
Awesome. And we'll put all that stuff in the podcast notes. And also we'll put some of the links to where you guys know you're going to be at events.
Perfect.
Put that in the notes too, so that if people are near you, they can come and see it in person. But it's an exciting time, and it's fun to see livestock back on the land. And, you know, I'll never forget one of our very early podcast recordings we did with Tom Cotter up in Minnesota. And he called us during the podcast from his cover crop field where he had cows grazing, and he was sitting out there, and he just had a chair, and he's like, I just love being out here because there's just life happening out here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was almost so loud from all of the critters that you could hear all of that in the background of the podcast. It was fantastic. But I think that that's one of the things that these types of technology enable, is that you're not just bringing livestock back to the land, but you're bringing all of the other beneficial insects and things, birds, and all of these different system pieces that get back into play because we're not a monoculture anymore. Right?
Exactly. And eventually people back to the land.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And it's so important to watch as that happens. And it just gives us an opportunity to let everybody kind of be involved in that, in the growing of their food. Right. So
exactly.
It's exciting. So
hey, Kim, I should also just put a plug in for anyone that's interested. They can go to nofence.no, our website, and there's a button right there on the homepage that says register your interest.
Excellent.
That would be the first step.
Okay.
That's a confirmation email, but just because of the demand, like, don't expect a personal reach out right away. We'll get to everybody, and we absolutely receive those. but just like a heads up.
Yeah.
We'll get it. We promise.
It's only us right now in the US, so we're trying.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, we're excited about the work that you're doing, and I'm excited about the opportunities that this opens up. And you guys also have information and resources on your nofence.no website as to integrating livestock into the onto your land and some of the different opportunities that are available there. So thank you both for taking time to visit us today, and we'll look forward to seeing where everything goes and watching what happens next summer.
Thank you, Kim.
Yeah, thanks, Kim.
Take care. Well, I sure hope you've gained some insight and excitement about the opportunities ahead of us as bringing livestock back to the land is becoming a reality. Oh, and don't forget, we're celebrating our 100th episode, taking a deep dive with Gabe Brown that will be airing on January 3rd. And as always, if you'd like to learn more about what we're doing to help growers implement soil health, check out our website at asn.farm, and there you can click on links to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. There's a lot of great things happening and always something to learn. Thanks for listening.